My name is Emily, and today is a day I'll never forget. It all started a few weeks ago when my friends and I decided to explore the old, abandoned school building on the outskirts of town. It was a place people had avoided since it closed down years ago. The windows were all smashed, the walls covered in graffiti, and the building looked like a bleak ruin from times past. Our group consisted of me, my best friend Josh, his girlfriend Sarah, and our buddy Mark. We had all met at the youth club and shared the same sense of adventure. So, we decided it was time to explore the abandoned school building. As we approached the building, I felt a strange unease in the air. It was as if the building itself was breathing, a soft whisper that echoed through the deserted halls. But I pushed my fear aside and followed my friends inside. The interior of the building was just as gloomy as its exterior. The air smelled of dust and decay, and I felt a chilling cold wrap around me. But we didn't let that deter us from pressing on, curious about what we would find. We wandered through the abandoned classrooms and hallways, venturing deeper into the heart of the building. Everywhere we looked, there were signs of vandalism and destruction, and I could vividly imagine how it must have looked here when the school was still in operation. Suddenly, we heard a noise, a faint scratching coming from one of the classrooms. Our curiosity was piqued, and we decided to investigate the source of the sound. As we entered the classroom, our breath caught in our throats. In the center of the room stood an old desk, covered in dust and cobwebs. But that wasn't the strangest thing. On the desk lay a book, its pages flickering as if being turned by invisible hands. And the sound we had heard came from the book itself, a soft whisper that sent shivers down our spines. Our curiosity got the better of us, and we approached the book slowly, as if afraid to touch it. But before we could do anything, something strange happened. The book began to open on its own, and a bright light poured out from its pages, illuminating the room and blinding us. And then everything went black. When I came to, I found myself in a different place. It was dark and cold, and I felt an eerie presence surrounding me. My friends were there too, and we stood in a large room shrouded in gloomy shadows. We tried to figure out where we were and how we had gotten here, but it seemed like time stood still and we were trapped in a nightmare. But then we heard a faint whisper echoing through the room, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. We turned around and saw a figure in the shadows, a sinister figure staring at us with empty eyes. It was as if it came from another world, a world full of darkness and despair. The figure spoke to us, its voice a soft murmur that echoed in our minds. It told us of the dark secrets of the abandoned school building, of the souls trapped here seeking redemption, and it warned us to leave, for the evil lurking in this place would consume us if we didn't flee quickly. But before we could react, something unexpected happened. The walls began to shake, the floor trembled, and I felt the darkness enveloping us and swallowing us whole. And then we were alone again, back in the abandoned school building, as if nothing had happened. We knew we had to flee quickly, but the way out seemed blocked, as if the building itself wanted to hold us captive. We ran through the halls, panic rising in our hearts with each step we took closer to freedom. But then we heard it again, the faint whispering that haunted us, that surrounded us like an icy embrace. And suddenly we were back where it all began, in front of the old abandoned school building, as if time had rewound and we were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. We knew we had to do something to escape the curse of the abandoned school building, but we had no idea how to do it. We were trapped in a vicious cycle of darkness and despair, and time was running out. But then I remembered the book we had found in the classroom, the book that seemed to come alive and led us here. Perhaps there were answers within it. Perhaps it was the key we needed to break the curse and free ourselves. So I set out to find the book, and eventually I found it, hidden in a secret room deep inside the building. It was old and weathered, but as I flipped through the pages, I felt a power awakening within me. I knew I only had one chance to break the curse, and I focused all my energy on the book, on the words that would change my fate. And then something incredible happened. The building began to shake, the walls trembled, and I felt the darkness around me begin to fade. and suddenly we were free, back in the world of the living, as if the curse of the abandoned school building had been broken. But that wasn't the end of our story, because as I closed the book, I felt a coldness that pierced to the bone, and I knew that the curse of the abandoned school building had not yet been broken. It still lurked in the shadows, ready to return and swallow us again if we weren't careful. And so we returned to our world, our hearts filled with the certainty that evil can never be fully defeated. But we were not alone, we had each other, and together we would defy the curse of the abandoned school building for as long as it took.
I never thought I'd find myself standing in front of the old abandoned school that had haunted my dreams since childhood. The sight of its decrepit facade sent shivers down my spine, yet here I was, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity that seemed to outweigh any rational fear. It all began when my friend group, consisting of Alex, Sarah, Jake, and myself, stumbled upon an old letter tucked away in the attic of an abandoned house. The letter, yellowed with age and written in elegant script, invited us to explore the derelict school on the outskirts of town. It was signed simply, "A Fellow Adventurer." Despite the eerie nature of the invitation, we couldn't resist the thrill of the unknown. We made plans to meet at the school at midnight, armed only with flashlights and our wits. As I stood there, my breath visible in the cold night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. But I pushed the thought aside, reassuring myself that it was just nerves getting the best of me. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, leading the way into the darkness of the abandoned school. As we entered the school, the musty smell of decay assaulted our senses, and the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. The beam of my flashlight danced across the crumbling walls, revealing graffiti-covered lockers and broken windows boarded up with rotting wood. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing off the linoleum floors. Every creak and groan of the building sent a chill down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. We explored the classrooms one by one, finding nothing but dust and debris. But as we ventured deeper into the heart of the school, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Suddenly, Sarah let out a sharp gasp, causing us all to freeze in place. She pointed her flashlight at a faded chalkboard, where a message had been scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Get out while you still can." I felt a knot form in my stomach as dread washed over me. Who had written this warning and why? But before I could dwell on it further, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, echoing through the empty halls. Without hesitation, we bolted towards the source of the sound, our hearts pounding in our chests. But when we reached the classroom from which the scream had originated, we found nothing but darkness and silence. As we stood there, panting and bewildered, a cold chill swept through the room, causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand on end. I could sense a presence in the darkness, watching us with unseen eyes. And then, as if materializing out of thin air, a figure appeared before us. It was a young girl, her ghostly form flickering in and out of existence like a fading memory. Her eyes were hollow and empty, and her voice echoed with an otherworldly resonance. "Why have you come here?" she whispered, her voice sending shivers down my spine. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I was frozen in place, unable to tear my gaze away from the haunting apparition before me. "We mean no harm," Alex finally managed to say, his voice trembling with fear. "We only came to explore." The ghostly girl regarded us with a sad expression, her translucent form shimmering in the dim light. "You should not have come," she said softly. "This place is cursed, and those who enter never leave." With that ominous warning, the ghostly girl faded away into the darkness, leaving us alone once more. Despite the ghostly encounter, we pressed on, driven by a morbid curiosity that refused to be quenched. But as we ventured deeper into the bowels of the school, it became increasingly clear that something was terribly wrong. The corridors seemed to shift and warp around us, leading us in circles and confounding our sense of direction. Every door we tried was either locked or led to an empty room, and with each passing moment, the oppressive atmosphere grew more suffocating. It was as if the school itself was alive, a malevolent entity toying with us like puppets on a string. Panic began to gnaw at the edges of my mind, threatening to consume me whole. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we stumbled upon a staircase leading down into the depths of the building. With no other options left, we descended into the darkness, the stale air growing colder with each step we took. But as we reached the bottom of the stairs, we were met with a sight that froze the blood in our veins. Before us stood a vast chamber, its walls lined with rows upon rows of empty coffins. It was then that we realized the true horror of the school's past and the fate that awaited those who dared to disturb its slumber. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that we were not alone in the chamber. Shadows danced along the walls, whispering sinister secrets that sent shivers down my spine. And then, from the darkness emerged the figure of a man, his eyes gleaming with madness as he advanced towards us. It was clear that he was the one behind the horrors that had plagued the school, and we were nothing more than pawns in his twisted game. "We shouldn't have come here," Sarah whimpered, her voice barely more than a whisper. But there was no turning back now. With a sense of grim determination, we faced the madman head-on, ready to confront whatever horrors lay in store. The ensuing battle was a blur of adrenaline and terror, each of us fighting for our lives against the deranged assailant. But despite our best efforts, it seemed as though we were hopelessly outmatched. Just when all seemed lost, a blinding light filled the chamber, illuminating the darkness with a brilliant intensity. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the madness subsided, leaving us battered and bruised, but alive. As we emerged from the depths of the school, blinking in the harsh light of day, I knew that we would never forget the horrors we had witnessed within those haunted halls. But despite the nightmares that would surely follow us for the rest of our days, we had survived, and for that, I was eternally grateful.
My name is David, and I've always been fascinated by the mysteries of old abandoned buildings. When I heard about a group of friends planning to explore the old Pinecrest High School, I couldn't resist. The school was on the outskirts of town and had been abandoned for years. Together with my friends Max, Sarah, and Chris, we set out to explore the crumbling ruin. As we approached the school, I was immediately struck by its imposing yet ominous presence. Most of the windows were broken, and the structure showed signs of decay from years of neglect. Yet despite its abandonment, the school exuded an eerie allure. We entered the building through the broken front door and were greeted by a chilling breeze that swept through the empty corridors. Dust danced in the air as we ventured deeper into the heart of the school. Rusty lockers and broken furniture littered the halls, remnants of a forgotten time. We decided to explore the school further and stumbled upon a forgotten classroom at the back of the building. The chalkboard was covered in faded chalk drawings, and the old desks sat abandoned in rows. Suddenly, we heard a dull knocking coming from one of the closets. Our curiosity piqued, we slowly opened the closet. But what we found inside left us frozen. A dusty book with strange symbols on the cover, surrounded by an aura of unease. The book captivated us, and we decided to examine it closer. As I flipped through the first pages, I felt an eerie presence enveloping me. The words on the pages seemed almost alive, and I could feel them drawing me in. Suddenly, the book began to whisper, its pages turning on their own as if it had a life of its own. I could barely make out the words, but I sensed they summoned something dark and powerful. Our friends grew nervous, but I couldn't stop reading. I felt an inexplicable urgency driving me forward. But the deeper I delved into the words, the stronger the feeling of oppression around me grew. Suddenly, we heard a sound that resembled a deep growl, followed by eerie whispers echoing through the halls. Our hearts raced as we wondered what we were doing here and what dark forces we had summoned. We decided to close the book and leave the school, but it was too late. A dark presence had spread around us, and we felt trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The shadows seemed to come alive, wrapping around us and suffocating us. We ran through the corridors, but the doors were stuck shut, and the windows were impenetrable. Suddenly, we saw them, the shadows of the past, crawling out of the walls and gathering around us. They were the ghosts of those who once attended the school, and they didn't want to let us go. We tried to flee, but the shadows seemed to pursue us, their cold fingers reaching out for us as we desperately tried to break free. We found ourselves trapped in a dark room, surrounded by the shadows of the past, unsure of how to escape. The darkness seemed to swallow us, and I couldn't shake the feeling of hopelessness. Suddenly, we heard a voice speaking to us from the shadows. It was a cold, inhuman voice, presenting us with an ultimatum. Either we sacrifice ourselves, or the shadows would keep us trapped forever. We were desperate and didn't know what to do. But then I remembered the book we had found and the words written within it. Perhaps there was a way to defeat the darkness before it consumed us. I reached for the book and began to read, the words whispering answers to me, solutions to the puzzle that held us captive. The shadows trembled and recoiled as the light of knowledge pierced their darkness. With our combined efforts, we managed to push back the shadows and reach the light at the end of the tunnel. We fled the school, our hearts filled with relief that we had escaped the darkness' grasp. But the memories of the horror we had experienced would linger in our minds forever, a constant reminder of the dangers of curiosity and the power of the supernatural. And as we moved away from the school, I knew that the shadows of the past would always be with us, a grim echo from the halls of the abandoned school.